just a normal, happy, caring kid. But he also like worked really hard at anything he did.
Every day was, he'd wake up, run out, smile, wonder what's going on.
He was always like a go-getter. He'd always try to go do the things that no one else thought he could do.
But he's the nicest person that I've ever met in my life.
Oh, here's my friend Jason. Hi. Hi, sweetie. Hi, sweetie. Thank you. How you doing?
Some people come into the world leaving a mark so profound, so unshakable, that their presence is never truly gone. Jace Smith was one of those extraordinary souls. His story is a tale of hardship, but also a celebration of the incredible impact one life can have. This is his story.
He really enjoyed going to my mom and dad's farm. He would get our phones and call to come pick him up in the morning. Also, my dad would show up at the door and off he went.
I think my favorite memory, just like throughout life, is just like always having someone with me, doing all the stuff that we wanted to do. We go to the pool together in the summers, ride our bikes around, and like my friends are his friends and his friends are my friends. So it's just like being in that community.
Anybody and everybody was his friend. You know, he could not know you, and he could come up to you and strike up a conversation, and you could be best friends in about 5 minutes with Jace.
For Jace, school was a little bit, he had some more challenges when it came to his disability, when it came to reading, math. He struggled to remember things.
I would say school probably was never his favorite because he did have to work harder. But I think, he was the hardest worker you had. And I think, his teachers would always say, oh my gosh, he's such a good kid.
You have certain students that stand out more than others, and Jace was just one of those that just changed your life by his being positive.
So it wasn't necessarily easy for him all of the time, but he made it seem like, well, that's okay. We can do this. We'll tackle it together.
Jace's differences began to be noticed at home.
We were walking one time to go watch my niece play gymnastics, and he just fell. And I was like, dude, what's going on? And he's like, my legs just feel weak. And so, he had no control over it. So I think, knowing something was wrong, it was like, okay, we need to go and connect with the doctors and figure out what's happening here. I think the uncertainty of being like, why can't he run with us to a certain extent, or like, why does he have to sit down? That was always something. Mm-hmm. But again, that was just normal for me in my life.
On February 19th, 2016, everything changed.
He came into the room and he couldn't swallow, and he just looked at us. His eyes were so sad that something was majorly wrong. And I remember, we got him dressed so he could go to the hospital, and he gave me a hug and he looked up at me and he said, I love you. And I was like, buddy, it's gonna be okay. Dad's gonna take you and everything's gonna be okay.
And I took him to the hospital about 2 or 3 in the morning. And he walked in, so I thought was promising because he walked in with some power. I didn't have to carry him, but they took him into the emergency room right away and started working on him. They put a tube down his throat for breathing, and they put him out to start seeing what they could do to help him.
Then Chris came back without him, and I was like, he's like, we have to go to Mayo. They're life flighting him. And at that point, they put him in a medically induced coma because his seizure-like activity was happening and it just wasn't stopping and they didn't know what else to do.
A kid that brought so much energy to the world, brought so much energy to everything he did, ended up passing from something that kind of sucked the energy from him.
It was never known until the end of that he had the mitochondrial mutation.
After Jace's passing, the Smith family sent his cells for genetic testing, revealing mitochondrial disease.
When they told us that, I was like, okay, so now what?
Did he have it his whole life? Is it something that was passed down from us? Does Macy have it? What do we have to worry about for the future?
Dr. Eric Payne, a neurologist at Mayo Clinic, is familiar with mitochondrial disease and the DNM1L mutation, and worked closely with the Smith family during Jace's 11-week stay.
Mitochondrial disease are any disease that affects the function of mitochondria.
Mitochondrial disease affects roughly 1 in 5,000 people. While some mutations are hereditary, the mutation in the DNM1L gene is not passed down. This disease targets the mitochondria in cells, which provide the energy needed for normal bodily functions.
We ended up sending some of Jace's skin cells, fibroblasts, to researchers in California, and they looked under a microscope at the mitochondria to see what they looked like, and they could see that they were elongated and not normal looking. But in addition, there was a mitochondrial researcher who had read our case report and reached out to us, and she has, Jace's fibroblast samples with the permission of the family.
Dr. Payne connected the Smith family to Dr. Vivian Gamma, whose research at the Vivian Gamma Clinic focuses on potential treatment and therapies for mitochondrial disease.
The donation of Jace's cells was invaluable to our research. His fibroblasts allow us to study initially how the DRP1 mutations affect cellular function, particularly now that we're working also in neurogenesis. But our first publication was done entirely with his cells.
Building on the groundbreaking research from Dr. Gamma, the hope for a future without mitochondrial disease is strongest in those who carry on the fight. Chris was an assistant coach for the Warburg wrestling team, allowing Jace to grow up around Warburg wrestling and become a constant fixture in the wrestling program. Each year at the Takedown Mito Meet, they wrestle not just for victory on the mat, but for someone that inspired many, and a soul lost too soon.
Wherever Chris went, Jace went, and it was awesome. He was a fixture in our program. He was always around. Our guys loved him. He brought an energy, he brought a presence, and he loved to be around the wrestlers. He loved to be around the program.
But he loved it in there. I think just the energy in the room. He also loved Coach Keller, Coach Miller. It was a good relationship and a good place to have your kids grow up around.
The first Takedown Mito was in 2017, and we made some shirts at halftime of the wrestling meet. I talked to the crowd of what it was and what happened.
It was hard to talk about it, but I think, a healing piece as well. So I think, the Warburg wrestling family extends so far from alums and parents, and we've always felt the support from them.
No, it's an emotional night. It's different than any other competition in terms of, we're honoring someone that's passed away and passed away at such a young age. And, someone that meant so much to our program and his entire family, how much they mean to our program. Our guys wrestle and always have wrestled for a little bit more that night because, they're wrestling for Jace's memory and his legacy.
I think it's been really powerful just to see the momentum that we've been building. And that's what we want, is to raise awareness and to get our story out there so people know about this disease.
At the 2025 Takedown Mito Meet, there was a special guest, Olivia Chambers, a Paralympian diagnosed with mitochondrial disease. Olivia met Macy at the University of Northern Iowa, where they both attended college. Olivia heard about the Kick Mito soccer game at UNI, where she discovered the Smith family's story.
Yeah, the Smith family reached out to me and asked if I wanted to do a speech at this event, and I really thought that it was important for me to get there and to speak because there aren't very many opportunities to spread the word about mitochondrial disease.
Despite Olivia's battle with mitochondrial disease leaving her without vision, she has found a way to continue her lifelong passion, swimming.
Being visually impaired qualifies me for para swimming, and when I started that journey 2 years ago, it really just kind of took off and I made the national team, and then this past year I was able to go compete in Paris for Team USA.
Not only has Olivia continued swimming, but she's excelled at it, winning 2 silver medals and 1 gold medal last summer at the 2024 Paralympic Games in Paris.
It was incredible. It was honestly one of the best things I've ever done. It was absolutely insane. There were 15,000 people in the crowd while I was swimming, and whenever you would walk out from the call room and about to race, the crowd would just roar, and it really got you pumped up.
Jace had compassion, energy, and a zest for life. Jace's legacy is honored at the Waverly Shell Rock High School through a memorial scholarship given to a senior of the wrestling program who displays similar characteristics as Jace.
When he passed, we had quite a few people donate, give us some money, and we're like, well, this is one of the things that we could give back.
They do a scholarship. Every year, there's a scholarship given to graduating seniors that are in the wrestling program, whether it be cheerleaders, female, male wrestlers, or managers. And what they have to do is basically tell how Jace has impacted their life, write a little bit about how Go Hawk Wrestling has impacted their life. Macy, Chris, Natalie, and I kind of read through them and kind of pick out, the ones that stand out, and then they give a scholarship to those kids.
He picked out some characteristics of Jace, hardworking and caring and loving for all. So we use Josh to help us figure out, okay, who gives their 100%, because we want it to match, and they have to be good stewards of the community and make sure that they have a goal of continuing college education.
We want his legacy to live on as well at Waverly.
Mitochondrial disease has taken so much from so many. And while there is no cure for this disease today, ongoing research at the Vivian Gamma Lab is producing encouraging results. Every discovery is a step closer to a future where this cruel disease no longer steals lives. The battle isn't over. The fight for a cure continues, and with it, the promise that hope is the true victor and will never be lost.
Obviously, I think the more awareness and the more we can do to try and drive to find a cure, and everybody does their part. Hopefully, it's something that can be done.
Just knowing that we are progressing in research and there are people looking for cures is really good to know and gives me hope.
Through these awareness events, we've met people that are like, wow, we've never had someone else that had this, so just connecting people and making sure that people know it's could be an option if you're struggling to find answers with the disease. So I'm hopeful that one day we'll get there.